Is Russia really Africa's friend? Back in 2014, the Wagner Group was born with a mission to ensure Russia's involvement in the conflict between Ukraine and Donbass remained concealed. It was like a secret weapon, allowing Russia to operate indirectly. As their success grew, so did their ambitions. The Wagner Group set its sights on Syria, joining the fight against the notorious Islamic State. But here's the twist. They weren't acting alone. The Assad regime welcomed them with open arms, offering a quid pro quo arrangement. In exchange for their military prowess, the mercenaries were granted concessions to extract oil from the very fields they helped liberate. It was a murky dance of power and resources, played out in the shadows of the Syrian conflict. And then the Wagner Group's shadowy presence shifted again, this time to the vast lands of Africa. In 2017, they descended upon Sudan, answering the call of then-President Omar al-Bashir. Their mission: to quell the protests against his regime. But al-Bashir wasn't just seeking their military might. He had something to offer in return, an enticing reward that would further fuel the Wagner Group's ambitions. Exclusive mining rights for gold were bestowed upon Commander Yevgeny Prigozhin, the mastermind behind the group. So, from the shadows of Ukraine to the depths of Syria and the vast African continent, the Wagner Group's operations have left many questioning Russia's true intentions. Are they a friend or a hidden hand manipulating events? In this video, we look at the other narrative of what your every media outlets present to you and embark on a quest for answers, exploring Russia's presence in Africa, submerging into the realms of defense, security, and the recent Russia-Africa summit. Our goal is not to pass judgment, but to present different perspectives and spark critical thinking. As sanctions continue to shut Russia out of Western financial and economic markets, Russia is relying on other international actors to offset its losses. China has been a key partner over the past few years, but Russia does not depend exclusively on its powerful neighbor. In recent years, Russia has rekindled its historic ties with countries on the African continent. Many of these relations were first established by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Between 2015 and 2022, Russia's trade with African countries doubled to about $20 billion a year. In addition to influence, these ties are an outlet for Russian military expertise and equipment, including training and arms sales. Economic ties also provide Russia with access to minerals and rare metals, including aluminium in Guinea and lithium in Zimbabwe. These resources are in high demand, as they have proven essential for digital technologies, as well as for the green energy transition. For African countries, partnering with Russia offers an alternative to Western powers and China. Before we move any further, it is important to analyze Russia's historical ties with Africa. Russia's engagement with African countries is not new. Backed by its ideological commitment to decolonization, Russia's communist predecessor, the Soviet Union, established partnerships with African countries soon after they claimed independence. Its involvement was driven by a mixture of ideological commitment, pragmatic economic interests, and the need to build alliances in the Cold War. The newly independent African countries desperately needed to find economic partners other than their former colonial powers to help them build their economies and survive in the long term. Several ultimately became theaters for protracted Cold War proxy wars, such as the Ethio-Somali War, 1977 to 1978, and the Angolan Civil War, 1975 to 2002. The Soviet Union engaged with many regimes across the continent, including Modibo Keïta in Mali and Sékou Touré in Guinea. It provided support across a variety of fields, ranging from industrial to military assistance. The Soviet Union established a multifaceted partnership with Mali after the country gained independence in 1960. In 1961, the two countries signed trade, economic, and cultural cooperation agreements, allowing Mali to reduce its dependency on France. It also built infrastructure, such as a cement factory and gold mining enterprise, to aid Mali's industrial development. Keïta's regime in Mali was overthrown in 1968, with power taken by a government that improved relations with France. However, Mali continued to receive military aid from the Soviet Union, such as pilot training as well as artillery and parachute training. This relationship represents the basis for Russia's involvement in Mali to this day. The Soviet Union also engaged in a partnership with Guinea. After independence from France in 1958, Guinea became the first former French colony in West Africa to refuse membership in the French community and opt for full independence instead. This move led France to withdraw support. Guinea's leader Sékou Touré rejected the United States as an ally and courted the Soviet Union instead. Guinea received arms and equipment, as well as military training and economic assistance. The Soviet Union also provided millions of dollars in aid to Guinea, supporting its industry and constructing cement and leather mills. The West African countries' relation with the Soviet Union fluctuated over the years, from rapprochement with the United States during the Kennedy administration to allowing the Soviets to use its airfields during the Angolan War. However, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation faced a decade-long social and economic crisis. Its commitments in Africa became marginal, though the legacy of ties remained. How did Russia find itself involved in African affairs again? Russia's interest in Africa was reignited following the oil boom of the first decade of the 21st century. Buoyed by newfound economic strength, Russia set out to establish a multipolar world in which it could have a pivotal role. Since then, Russia has expanded its partnerships on the continent. In 2008, President Vladimir Putin visited Libya, a country which previously enjoyed close ties with the Soviet Union. Putin went to discuss energy and arms sales and cleared billions of dollars in Libyan Soviet-era debt. Then, in 2009, recently elected President Dmitry Medvedev embarked on a 4-day trip to Africa, visiting countries such as Egypt, Nigeria, Namibia, and Angola, accompanied by a 400-strong business delegation, including heads of key Russian companies such as Gazprom. The trip focused on energy and mineral exploration, as well as the sale of Russian technology. Hoping to reset the US-Russia relationship, as well as increase its influence in Africa, Medvedev's Russia abstained from a vote in the UN Security Council in 2011, enabling a US-led NATO intervention in Libya. The Russian president took this decision despite security officials warning him about its potential to extend US hegemony, and then Prime Minister Putin decrying a possible rise in extremist movements in case of a NATO intervention. Enabling NATO's intervention proved disastrous for Russia. Not only did the intervention contribute to regime change and Libya's destabilization, but it jeopardized $6.5 billion worth of signed or verbally promised contracts for Russian energy companies. Instead of resetting US-Russia relations, the intervention made Putin, who would soon regain the presidency, more distrustful of the West. After the killing of Gaddafi, Putin flatly denied there was a US-Russia alliance at the time, stating, "I sometimes feel that America does not need allies. It needs vassals." NATO's intervention heightened Putin's sense of vulnerability. If a leader like Gaddafi, who accepted Western terms, was nevertheless brutally removed from power, who could guarantee that this would not happen in other places, including Russia? Western sanctions enacted following Russia's occupation of Crimea and wider intervention in Ukraine since 2014 led Russia to redouble its efforts in Africa. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has made several trips to the continent over the past few years. Russia has rekindled relations with former allies, such as Guinea and Mali, and entered a new partnership with the Central African Republic, CAR. Russia re-entered the stage at a time of growing discontent. France, in particular, is seen as continuing a policy of imperialism in West Africa through conditional support and profitable business deals. Increasing numbers also felt disillusioned with China's offer of an alternative, as it indebted African partners with its loans while conducting its projects with Chinese workers and experts. This disappointment has led countries such as Ghana to cancel Chinese-led initiatives. Russia's re-engagement also coincided with U.S. disengagement from the region under Donald Trump, whose priorities were Iran, China, and American isolationism. African countries' rapprochement with Russia might also be aided by the legacy of the Soviet Union's involvement. Support in a time of dire need created a lasting reservoir of goodwill towards its successor. Having suffered exclusion from the international market and Western-imposed sanctions, some African countries might be more sympathetic to Russia's current situation. Russia avoids taking any moralizing stance, as opposed to both its Western counterparts and its predecessor, the Soviet Union. It traded ideology for interests to engage with regimes questioned by Western powers, such as Mali, the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and CAR. Let us look at some of Russia's economic activities on the continent of Africa. Apart from military collaboration, Russia has also started working with African countries on extracting key natural resources. As the race for metals and rare earth needed for the green transition speeds up, they are competing with Western and Chinese interests on the continent. In Guinea, Russian aluminium company Rusal owns the Kindia Bauxite Company, which accounts for a third of Rusal's bauxite output, as well as two other companies that mine bauxite and refine it into aluminium. Aluminium is essential for aircraft and spacecraft components, as well as power lines and many other applications. Although Guinea has a mining code that requires mining companies to pay taxes and protect the environment and the communities around their mines, these rules are relaxed where favored partners are concerned. Many Russian companies are exempt from paying land taxes and salaries and even enjoy the renewal of long-term contracts. Russia is also expanding its lithium investments in Africa. Lithium is essential for the shift to e-mobility. There will be around 18 times more lithium required by 2030 and up to 60 times more by 2050. Electric vehicles and energy storage solutions could potentially increase demand by almost 500% by 2050. African countries such as Zimbabwe and the DRC are among the countries with the greatest lithium reserves. Rosatom, the Russian state nuclear energy company, aims to control 3% of the world lithium market by 2025 and 10% by 2050, partly by tapping into these African resources. Russian military collaboration with Africa. This is where we raise the question of whether Russia is really a friend or a threat to Africa. In a semi-desertic region of the world, where borders are porous, states are weak, and resources are limited, climate change is further driving the dynamics of conflict. An upsurge in extremist groups would be extremely difficult to rein in, and the consequences would be disastrous and global. Not only would extremist groups have a new geographic base from which to plot attacks around the world, but it could also lead to mass displacement of people. Russia's involvement in Mali could help maintain some stability in the region, but it would be on its terms. Western powers such as France and the US are particularly concerned about the involvement of mercenary Russian organizations, such as the Wagner Group, which has close ties to the Kremlin. Some analysts believe that the Wagner Group is a proxy organization of the Russian state, rather than a private company selling services on the open market, providing a force that is cheaper, less accountable, and often more capable than regular armies. The first identification of the Wagner Group was during the 2014 conflict in Ukraine, when its mercenaries backed pro-Russian separatist forces in eastern Ukraine. The Wagner Group is also reportedly active in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Their numbers are likely to increase as they are trying to recruit soldiers into their ranks. Troops from countries such as the Central African Republic have expressed their interest in fighting in Ukraine. Organizations like the Wagner Group are tools for state influence. Deployed under the cover of plausible deniability, they enable arms trafficking networks and hide casualties from the Russian side. This aspect of Russia's presence sets a dangerous precedent for interventions in other parts of the world. Wagner Group, shouldn't we talk about this? Who are they and what are their activities in Africa? The Wagner Group was initially created so that Russia would not be directly implicated in the fighting against the Ukrainians in the Donbas as early as 2014. It then expanded its operations to Syria, where it has been fighting against the Islamic State at the behest of the Bashar Assad regime, which has given it as a quid pro quo concessions to extract oil from the fields it had liberated from the radicals. The group arrived in Africa in 2017 when a 500-strong force was sent to Sudan to help its then President Omar al-Bashir quash the protests against him. Like Assad, he gave the mercenaries a valuable consideration in this transaction. Commander Yevgeny Prigozhin got exclusive mining rights for gold. Sudan was only the beginning. In 2017, Moscow took advantage of the French withdrawal from the Central African Republic and ultimately sent Wagner Group military instructors to help the leader Faustin Archange Touadera fight the local rebels. This has helped him consolidate his grip on power, to the point that even his protection detail is partially composed of armed Russians, including its chief. As a result, Wagner struck gold, literally and figuratively. It got exclusive mining rights for gold and diamonds and a 30-year concession to clear areas with tropical forests in the Congo Basin, exploiting the high demand for timber in the West and among rich Gulf clients. According to AEOW, using some 30% of the concession area in the Congo Basin will result in some $890 million funneling into its coffers. According to the Financial Times, during the years of operation in Africa before the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Prigozhin made some $250 million. Unsurprisingly, the atrocities committed by the group in Ukraine have been as gruesome in Africa. When they were deployed to Libya in 2019 to help the rebel general Khalifa Haftar, they mined populated areas. In 2020, some 1,000 Wagner Group mercenaries arrived in Mali to help a military junta in its fight against the Islamists. The number of civilian deaths spiked almost overnight. According to a UN report, in one operation in the Malian town of Mora, they massacred some 400 non-combatants with helicopters. Civilian casualties in the country have risen disproportionately since Wagner's arrival, following clear patterns of the group's violence against local populations in Central African Republic, Libya, Syria, and Ukraine. Paul Stronsky, a senior fellow in Carnegie Endowment's Russia and Eurasia program, wrote, "Now the force has its sights trained on Burkina Faso, Mali's neighbor, where stability has long been absent. The mercenaries have reportedly already reached the country, even though the junta's leaders in the capital Ouagadougou have denied this." Wagner has become a very useful tool of Russian foreign policy in Africa, gaining significant influence with limited costs. It is important to keep in mind that Russia is achieving this influence while investing very little in Africa, accounting for less than 1% of the FDI going into the continent. Therefore, Russia will be highly reluctant to give this up when it has such little appeal otherwise around the world. In addition to the reassurances noted in the Business Insider article, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has publicly said that Wagner and the Russian government will continue its support to keep the African regimes it is working with in power. Lavrov went so far as to say that Wagner is doing a good job in Africa. Let us end off with Russia's main interests in Africa. From recent international debates, Russia has 4 main strategic interests in Africa. Gain a foothold in North Africa along the southern Mediterranean. By establishing an enduring military presence in this region, Russia would be in a position to menace NATO along its southern flank, as well as control and disrupt maritime traffic through this important waterway. Enhance Russia's global posture and perception as a great power. By being seen as an important actor in Africa and elsewhere around the world, Russia is able to present itself as an important global actor whose interests need to be considered. This has taken on greater importance for Russia following its isolation after its annexation of parts of eastern Ukraine and Crimea in 2014 and the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. By being welcomed in Africa, Russia is able to contend that it is not a pariah. The unwillingness of many African leaders to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine at the UN serves as an important tangible demonstration of this. Underscoring the importance of this African support further, FM Sergei Lavrov has made roughly 8 trips to Africa since the invasion of Ukraine. Undercut democracy and normalize authoritarianism. Russia has mostly gained influence in unaccountable authoritarian regimes in Africa. By coming to support these unpopular regimes and protecting them from sanctions and UNSC condemnations, Russia is able to quickly gain influence without significant investments. Propping up these regimes also serves Russia's interest in preventing democratic or colored revolutions from gaining traction. This limits Russia's isolation and pressure for democratic reforms in Russia itself. In other words, supporting authoritarians is both a means to gain influence and an end to Russia's strategic objectives. Reshape global order away from a UN-based system that respects territorial integrity and sovereignty and upholds the rule of law. This is the central premise of the Ukraine invasion. If Russia can get support globally for this aggressive imperial action, then it's a direct challenge to the rules-based UN system that Putin has long railed against. Russia is at a fundamental disadvantage under the current system. So, Putin is trying to reshape the international order to a more transactional, lawless system where might makes right that plays to Russia's interests and enable Russia to cut deals with regimes violating UN norms without reputational or financial cost. To the extent more African regimes sign on to this worldview, the more it is validated. Concluding, in the meantime, many African countries abstained in the United Nations vote condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, pointing towards a mix of allegiance and dependence. These countries included Mali, Namibia, and CAR. Their vote signals a willingness to continue and potentially expand their partnership with Russia, a country which offers them an alternative to Western and Chinese influences. The long-run consequences of the Western sanctions are yet to play out. They could well further push the recalibration of the world order. As the EU tries to reset its partnerships in Africa, Russia will likely continue to expand its influence too. So, is Russia truly Africa's friend? The answer to this question depends on various factors and perspectives. While Russia's activities in defense and security, as well as its economic interests, raise valid concerns, they also provide opportunities for African nations to assert their independence and strengthen their capabilities. It is crucial for African governments to carefully navigate these partnerships, ensuring they align with their national interests, development goals, and respect for human rights. Ultimately, Africa's relationships with global powers like Russia should contribute to the continent's progress, stability, and self-determination. We hope this discussion has shed light on the complexities surrounding Russia's involvement in Africa. Remember to keep the conversation going in the comments section below, and as always, stay curious and stay informed. Thanks for watching.